Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and tonight is open mic night, which is your opportunity to ask me any questions that you would like in order to progress your property development journey. Now, in order to do that and to give me a little bit of time to do some homework on some of your questions, if you can click on the links below, propdev.info/open-mic, that'll give me, all the right time to, prep for what it is that we need to do. So we run these events on the first Sunday of every single month. So get your questions in for next time round. In the meantime, we've got a cracking show ahead of you with a whole bunch of questions that have already come in. Very first question comes from TB. Now, TB's got multiple questions within the one question. So I might try to succinctly wrap this up, but it's talking about the different kind of people doing different inspections for different reasons inside your project. So the question is, what's the difference between a defects inspector and a quantity surveyor? And should I use either or both when it comes to doing inspections inside my project? So firstly, TB, they actually perform very, very, very different tasks. Okay, so firstly, quantity surveyor, per the title, quantity, they're looking at the bill of quantities that have actually been installed. So how much concrete, how much timber, and the like, how many nails have been used. And they're typically going to be used by your funder in order to assess, the percentage of completion of the project. Now, it is their job to say how much concrete, not to say whether or not the slab is flat or in the perfect right location. It is their job to say how much timber, not whether or not the wall is straight and the like. So they're just going to say, yes, it's actually there. Okay. But the defects inspector can actually also do defects. Now, there is the builder themselves will also get their own certifications at each stage to say, yes, the slab is engineered correctly. But again, it's going to say it's engineered correctly. It's not going to say that it's flat. And again, they'll have a frame inspection to say they've met the compliance requirements to say, is it structurally sound? But again, it's not actually straight. So the defects inspector has a role to play in actually identifying those defects. Now, this is one of those things where you really want to work with your builder, up front and actually let them know how and why you're actually wanting to engage a defects inspector to do this kind of work. Because technically, and I guess you're going to get a lot of pushback from the builder, but technically it's not actually a defect until the project is finished, okay? And so there's an argument to say from the builder, well, it's still a work in progress, and whatever you find along the way is not a defect until we get to the very, very end. Now, that doesn't make sense if you get to the end and find that the wall has got a bow in it or things like that. So if you can work with your builder and say, look, this is the reason why we're actually doing this process. We think it's a quality process for you and it's a quality process for us. We think it would be very, very worthwhile to do that. And give the builder some feedback along the way. Now, if a builder's doing all the right things, then there shouldn't actually be any genuine issues or challenges. But it would be great to have an independent person to actually identify those things along the way. Now, if you do, there are 4 key critical stages that you might consider, the defects person to come in and do an inspection. So firstly, the frame inspection. Again, that is, I've already emphasized this one, is the wall actually straight? So they're looking at 1, the compliance side of things, but 2, whether or not by the time the gyprock is actually put on and those sorts of things, whether or not the right things have actually been done. They're also looking at what insulation you might have spec'd to make sure that the right insulation between the walls is put in, so you're going to get the right sound deadening between rooms, etc. Okay, the roofing and external cladding, that's the next stage. Waterproofing and linings and practical completion. So they're the 4 stages that you might want to do that. Now, at each stage, the frame stage is really, the bones of the building. So if you get the frame incorrect, then it has a knock-on effect to everything that's actually going to hit later on. Okay, things like the roof and external cladding, they might identify potential issues that might turn up 3, 4, 5 years time with regards to leaking and the like. So roof leaks and breakdown of joints and things like that. So you want to make sure that you're actually inspecting those and identifying well before they actually fail. Your waterproofing and linings, so that's in all your wet areas. Again, you want to make sure that there's no internal leaks that are actually going to come through there, that everything's been done to an appropriate standard. And then practical completion is the one that most people are familiar with. And that if you are going to get an inspector at all, that one is almost a mandatory element. Now, practical completion is where you're going to pick up minor defects. Now, the minor defects come once the house is technically handed over to you, and you're going to find tiny little things like nicks in walls and perhaps I guess on external doors, perhaps they've not painted the top of the door jamb. So whilst the door might look like it's painted, that means that the top of the door is actually exposed to the weather, and over time that could physically get water into the door and things like that. So practical completion is where most people see the physical outcomes of that. So very important. I'm going to say that you do get both a QS to make sure that you're, paying for the right amount of payment along the way. So a lot of banks will actually mandate that. And your building inspector equally, to do, the minor defects. Both are very, very valuable. Make sure with both of them that you work with your builder and don't just get them to turn up on the spot, okay? But you want to actually tell the builder as part of your engaging of the contract and signing the contract that it's a condition that you're actually going to put in there. If you don't, then you're relying on your eyes, which may or may not be critically trained to identify those things. There's also, the Australian standards. Are you keeping up with all the Australian standards? So there's National Construction Code, and there's also what is genuinely a defect. So you might see a nick in the wall that when you walk down the passageway stands out because the way the light reflects on it. But did you know that there's actually an Australian standard that says, well, if you can't see it by standing directly in front of it from an exact distance, then it's not technically a defect. So you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing and actually identifying what is a technical defect, what is a perceived defect as well, and working with the builder along the way. So anyway, TB, hope you got plenty from that, mate. Yeah, very, very worthwhile. Next question comes from Kim. Kim says, I've just started following your work. Thank you. Would like to understand how to get into the market whilst being cash flow sensitive, but having good equity. Initially, I'd like to buy and subdivide one into two, nothing too onerous to start with. If serviceability is tight with major lenders, with what other financial options are available to someone like myself? Is it just a case of sitting down with your finance broker to investigate further? Kim, that's a fantastic question. It's actually one that we get relatively common here. So there's a couple of elements to this. I'm going to break down what you've done into multiple stages. So firstly, get very, very clear on what your strategy is. In this instance, you've indicated that you want to do 1 into 2 subdivisions or go down the subdivision path. Start to get to know those issues and challenges and how to actually do that side of thing very, very, very well. Okay, so do whatever courses you can, to learn the subdivision process. Go to our meetups, become an annual member, and review all of the prior real deals that are all in the subdivision process. So you can actually start to see what is actually involved. So that's going to give you the insights into how you can actually start to actually learn the process, okay? If you can afford to, I would highly recommend that you actually get formal education in this space, including a mentor and the like. Obviously, we offer services like that. That's not a sales pitch, but make sure that you find someone that is actually aligned to what you want to do. Now, back to your question with regards to the finance side of things. Well, there's actually 7 different ways to actually, run a project when you've got little to no money. So when you're saying to me that you've got equity, but you don't have serviceability, what you really want to do is a self-assessment to go, where is your true shortfall? So there's a deposit, there's serviceability, and then there's liquid cash to run the deal. Now, all 3 are needed in a deal. But it doesn't need to be you that provides all 3. And it doesn't necessarily mean that every deal needs everyone every single time, because with creative acquisition strategies, you might be able to avoid or defer some of those different things. Now, all of us have been indoctrinated using, I guess, by our bank and our community to say long-term residential lending, 20% deposit, serviceability, all those sorts of things. But when you're actually creating a deal, we actually want to look at the merits of the deal itself. And because we're looking at the merits of the deal itself, is what is the profitability of the deal and what is the circumstances of the vendor selling the deal, and can we manipulate the deal in such a way that we can overcome the limitations we've got in the deposit, liquid cash, and serviceability of the deal. Okay. So by way of example, okay, everyone thinks that a vendor wants instant cash and they want to get out of their deal straight away and move on to the next place. But there are going to be many, many instances where that vendor has not yet determined where they're going to go, and they actually need time to find the next place to go. So in instances like that, I guess settling on the property, kicking them out of their home is not in their best interests. So instead, what they want is time. And because they want time, we could use time to our advantage. We can come to a win-win solution with them to say, well, what if we bought it a little bit later in the process? You can stay living there. It's not going to cost you anything to live there because you already own the property. That's not going to cost us anything from a holding cost perspective. So instantly we've deferred our deposit, we've deferred our serviceability, and all we need at this point to progress the deal is the liquid cash to actually get all of our development approvals and those sorts of things along the way. Now, at some point, we may need to settle depending upon the other circumstances that that vendor may have. So for example, they might want to, I guess, get maximum cash out of the deal, and they may be willing to stay in the deal in order to share the risk and also share the profit. So if that's the case, not only did they have time, but they also had a high risk appetite. Maybe you don't buy it off them at all. So now, instead of settling at a later point in time, now you might not be settling in any instance. So again, it's just the liquid cash to actually run the deal. In either instance, what we're trying to do is we're trying to progress the deal far enough to actually add some value to the property, what is called soft equity. And through that soft equity, that gives an uplift in the value of the property that when we go to the construction phase, we can, I guess, use that soft equity to potentially secure the construction purchase. Okay, so the construction and the actual settlement in the first place. So there's many, many permutations in how you can actually do this. There's delayed settlement with early access. There's vendor finance. There's joint ventures with a landowner. There's joint ventures with money partners. There's getting private equity coming into the deal. There's lots of different ways that we can actually solve the problem. It's about not limiting our thinking to just traditional financing type arrangements. There's also commercial funding we can use. There's option contracts and a whole bunch more. Okay. So as I said, there's 7 different low or no money down strategies. As a matter of fact, we are in the process of actually developing a low or no money down course. We hope to be announcing that in the next couple of, I'm going to say the next 6 to 8 weeks. We're hoping to announce that. If you are interested in that, you can actually go to our education page. I'm going to see if I can find that. No, I can't at the moment. But if you go to our main homepage, developernetwork.com.au, and then click on education and have a look at the courses there. You can pre-register for that to say, this is the interest that I'm actually in. And once we actually release that course, then you'll get notification that that has actually come alive. So great way to actually learn, I guess, the different nuances of what is actually possible in this world. So hoping that helps, Kim. Next question comes from Nick along similar lines. Nick says, can you use equity from the property to get finance for the build? Absolutely, Nick. So equity in a property that you may already own, equity in the deal itself, that's the soft equity that's actually referring to. It could be equity. So if you're working with the landowner already, maybe they've got equity because they've owned it for a long period of time. If you're not working with the landowner, maybe you've added the soft equity in the process, or maybe you've got other assets that are sitting somewhere else where you've actually got equity as well. In all of the instances, the answer is if you're dealing with commercial lenders and not residential lenders, they will often use that equity as security in order to I guess, avoid the serviceability requirements that you might have with a traditional lender. Now, that soft equity then allows them, or that equity, whether it's soft or hard, then allows them to say, well, we are comfortable that given the profitability of the deal and the fact that there is equity or security in the deal, we're comfortable that we can actually progress the deal and not risk the lend. So yes, technically very easily possible, happens all the time, Nick. So hoping that helps. Next one, Jason. Jason says, what is the best tool for property developers can use to find potential development opportunities in Australia? Jason, the $1 million question, mate. There is no one single tool. I wish there was. I wish there was some magic bullet that we could actually throw at this. But there are 3 tools that you really want to have. The first one, a sales research tool. So that is understanding the market. So what should I be buying the raw site for? What is the finished product going to be selling for? You want to find, I guess, an arbitrage between those two, where you say, well, I can buy on average, run an average deal, and then on average sell the finished product and make money. So your sales research tool is going to tell you what areas has the highest probability for that actually to occur. Now, what you're going to find is there's a lot of issues and challenges in actually finding profitable areas. 90% of all development deals do not make profit. And so what you want to do is try and go into an area with a high probability of success. So your sales research tool will actually get you to find the area with the most probability for actually doing that. The next tool that you're going to need is a development research tool. Also, from a sales research tool, you could use things like RP Data, Price Finder, and National Property Data. They're the 3 tools that are the most common out there. RP Data being the clear leader, I guess, in the real estate agent space, but Price Finder is a very close alternative as well. Next one is your development research tool. So once you're in an area and you actually understand the profitability of that area per se, you're going to look at each individual property on its own merits, because one site right next door to another identical site could be the same zoning, could be the same land size, could be the same frontage, but you might find that one has some other issues and challenges that might prevent it from being developed. So your development research tool is the next thing to actually have on your kit. Now, there are free development research tools. So each council and or state government will actually provide an e-spatial planning tool that will actually tell you all the zonings and overlays that actually sit on there. Then you're going to look at things like Google Street Maps to see, what's the frontage of the property look like and the issues and challenges that you've got. What we're trying to identify here is what are the problems that we need to solve. Now, for all of the problems that we need to solve, we need to have a line item in our feasibility to actually do that. Okay, so all we're trying to do is there a fire hydrant outside the front of the property? Is there a ability to get a second driveway on there? Is there a street tree on there? We're trying to find all the issues, challenges, and problems, and those development research tools are going to help us. So there's free resources to do that. There's also paid resources. Number of resources out there. Archistar, I guess, is one of the better ones out there. There's also Land Checker, there's also Stash, there's a couple of others out there. Now, what those tools tend to do is the paid tools, they tend to not only look at the data that they get from the free resources, but they value add and they put on top of it. So they might put high-res satellite images, and they might put super detailed contours and a whole bunch of other things that are actually going to help you actually do your site assessment and your yield assessment. So those 2 are the tools that you're going to find. So and then from there, the third tool is this thing here, your brain. So what you need to do is actually look at each site on its own merits. And by using your brain, you're going to see that there are many, many ways and many permutations to actually do a deal. Now, for example, I'm going to make this very, very simple, okay? If we were doing a basic 1:2 subdivision, there are a huge number of permutations on how we could actually exit that deal. We could exit as 2 vacant blocks of land. We could, if the house is well positioned, we might be able to keep it on one side and sell as another vacant block of land. We might do a reno on the existing house, sell as a vacant block of land. We may do a brand new build on the vacant block of land. We may do 2 brand new builds. We may do any permutation of any of those as we start to go through. So what you'll see is that for any one site, there might be a number of different ways to actually exit it. So what we've got to do using this thing here is, and being an area expert, a strategy expert, and a suburb expert, a council expert, I should say, we're going to start to look at those permutations and go, I can see all the issues, challenges, and problems on this particular site. And out of the 16 or so different permutations of doing that basic 1 into 2, I can see that only 2 of those, or 3 of those maybe, might be profitable, and all of the rest of them don't make sense. So that, at the moment, there is no tool that will actually do that. That is your knowledge, your understanding, and your experience that's actually going to help you to actually see those permutations. Now, how that makes sense is by being that area expert and being the strategy expert and being the council expert, you're going to understand all the different issues, challenges, and problems that you need to solve, so that when you look at those permutations, you're going to say, well, what is the cost to exit them as land? What is the cost to do a renovation here? What is the cost to put the services and sewer and stormwater in there? What is the cost of construction in this area, knowing this market and knowing the quality and size of the build that we actually need to do? So you need to put some knowledge into the process. That does take some time to build, but is very doable. And so I would highly recommend I guess that you put the effort into that. Once you are an expert, though, you can replay that data, that education over and over again, and use it many, many, many times. And as you start to grow and as you start to scale, the number of permutations that can actually go into a deal start to get exponentially larger. So I said somewhere in the vicinity of about 16 different permutations for a basic 1 into 2. When you start to carve that up, then there's when you start to do 10s, 20, that sort of thing, the permutations that actually go into that are mind-boggling. So you really, really, really want to understand really well. Anyway, hope that helps, Jason. Next question comes from Andre. Andre says, who ultimately decides what professional services are required? I appreciate that every project will require an architect, a town planner, civil engineer, etc. But who mandates the requirement of, say, a fire engineer or a hydraulic engineer, or getting an acoustic report? Is this pushed by council before granting the development application, or is it something that builder requires in order to move through the process? Andre, that is a fantastic question, mate. And it comes back to a lot of the things I was just saying to Jason in the previous question. Okay. So firstly, you need to understand, I guess, all of the things that are required as a strategy expert. You also need to understand all of the rules that your council may require, and you need to do a thorough site assessment on your particular deal. And in doing so, you're going to identify all the issues, challenges, and problems that may sit on your site. So you may need to do a bushfire report if there is a bushfire overlay, but you won't need to if there's no bushfire overlay. You may need to do that if there is a flood overlay, but you won't need to do it if there's no flood overlay. You will need to do a site inspection and go, is there a street tree that you need to do, in which case you might need to get an arborist. You'll need to have a look at where's the bus stop located. You'll need to see whether or not there's a fire hydrant nearby, and whether or not you need your civil engineer to help you from that side of things. So as you identify all of the issues and challenges and problems, that is going to tell you what experts that you're actually going to need from the development application stage. And that's the key, is the application stage. Once the application is submitted, so you're going to find all the particular consultants that you need. You're going to engage with your town planner and confirm your list of requirements. So it could be a traffic engineer, it could be an acoustic engineer because you're beside a highway or beside a train line or something along those lines. Once you've identified all the appropriate consultants, they will submit a report into council, and then the council will give you a development approval, okay? Assuming that you've lodged an appropriate application, that is. When you get to the next stage, there is a knock-on effect from some of the prior elements that will actually then go into the building approval stage. So the building approval stage is then, or what is called a construction certificate, depending upon the state that you're in, will also require the engineering level details. So you'll need to have a structural engineer involved. You'll need to have a hydraulic engineer who's going to look at all of the things inside the house. So where is the plumbing going to go inside so that we can actually get water to the taps, so we can actually get sewerage, I guess, from the top floor downstairs? How do we get it out from the laundry? Those sorts of things, okay? We're also going to look at what is called a BASIX report. So that is an energy efficiency report. So where is the sun in summer and where is the sun in winter, and how is that going to heat up or cool down the property, and is that going to be 7-star energy efficiency rating? We're also going to need to, I guess, given the new livable standards with regards to disability access and that sort of thing into our properties, your architect needs to be skilled up in the ability to make sure that they can get, I guess, wheelchair access into the property, and the doorways are appropriately done, and a whole bunch of other things. So all of that goes into your, I guess, your construction certificate level drawings, okay? So your architect is going to be the best one placed to actually help you with that. Plus, there might be some mandates that come from the conditions from your development approval. Now, most of the mandates that come from your conditions from the DA will be predictable up front by knowing what the issues and challenges were. So you've got to look at each site on its own merits, identify all those issues and challenges, and then, I guess, follow that all the way through. Now, it's really that actually, that site assessment and identifying those issues and challenges where a lot of people fail from a feasibility perspective, because when they're looking at a site, they miss the fact that there is some issue or challenges that it's actually going to go in there, and hence they miss the repercussions of that when it comes to the cost implications of at the construction stage. And so from a feasibility perspective, that line item is completely missing. So the FISO looks good, but when they actually get to that stage of the project, the cost ends up turning up. The problem is always there and was laying dormant in the first place. So getting very, very good at your site analysis, being the council expert, so you know the rules of the area, being a strategy expert, so you know what is possible and what is actually required to actually solve that particular problem, and an area expert to understand that what you're buying for and selling for, those sorts of things, are the most critical elements, Andre, to actually to work that out as to what consultants are going to be there. Now, next one comes from Nicole. Now, Nicole's asking a little bit of a technical question with regards to GST. So I'm not legally qualified to actually answer this, but I will still try to give you some insights into what to do the right thing, okay? So Nicole's question, the ATO has rulings on what they deem to be substantial renovations and whether or not GST is due. So her question is this self-regulating, or does the developer and their accountant make the call on whether or not it's actually a substantial renovation? If this is the case, besides getting a private ruling to confirm what are the obligations that sit in and around this, okay? She then goes on to ask whether or not, I guess, she's aware of anyone that's done it, and whether or not they've, I guess, been inappropriately made the wrong decision. So I'm going to defer that one. I'm not going to answer that one because that's, I guess, breach of privacy, but I will talk to the substantial renovation element. So the ATO has a definition here. If you have a pre-existing house and you sell that pre-existing house and you do no work to it, then it's deemed that GST does not apply to that particular house, but rather capital gains tax would actually apply to that particular house. If you do a cosmetic renovation, then the same thing would then apply. A cosmetic renovation being a lick of paint and some minor repairs internally. Where it gets grey, and hence the question of Nicole, is what they call substantial renovation. Now, there is no actual legal definition here, and the ATO are quite vague on it. However, what I would give you as a guideline is to say, if you're not doing anything structural to the property at all, then it's almost certain that you are not doing a substantial renovation. But if you are doing either an extension out the back, maybe you're knocking down everything but the facade, maybe you're adding an extra layer on top, maybe you're lifting the house and putting something underneath. If you're doing something structural to the property, then you really, really, really need to talk to your accountant with regards to, I guess, the impact of that. Now, they're going to make a determination to say, well, if you had have built the house brand new versus the amount of effort that you've actually put into this particular and the cost that you've actually put into this extension or works, the accountant is going to say, in their opinion, whether or not, based on prior rulings, they deem that that is likely to have either triggered or not triggered that particular clause. Now, it's only an opinion at that point in time, but their opinion is very important, because they're going to say, look, based on prior case rulings, what you're trying to do, they have already made judgments in this regard. And so that is either in or out. Okay. Now, irrespective of their judgment, if you want to actually anoint that solution, then you are going to need to do an ATO private ruling. So that is, you're going to lodge an application through to the tax office. You're going to give them the merits of your particular project and the insights into what you're actually doing. And the ATO will give you a ruling that is independent of all prior other decisions. And they'll say, for you, that is substantial or that is not substantial based on the amount of work that you're actually doing. I would say, from a rule of thumb perspective, though, if you are not doing anything structural, it's fairly safe to say that you're not going to fall into that category. If you're doing something that is structural, you want to start to look at what are the costs involved in what you're doing as a proportion of what it would be if you did a brand spanking new build. So if you spent, say, 500K on a brand new build and you're only spending 100K on the structural reno, then that's only 20% of that. And so the ATO might deem that 20% is not substantial enough. If you're getting close to the 50% mark, now that is now starting to get, I guess, very, very close from a ratio perspective. And that is more likely to trigger, I guess, some of those prior use cases. And so you want to start to pay very, very close attention to exactly what you're doing and exactly other people that have actually done the same private rulings. Now, all of the ATO private rulings are on public display. They do anonymize, I guess, some of that data, but you can actually get the gist of what it is. So you can actually search the ATO for those private rulings in that regard and find, I guess, what is the closest use case to yours. That will give you a fairly strong insight into whether or not the ATO will have a care factor on that. And then we'll talk into your accountant, make the judgment call whether or not you feel that lodging a private ruling is in your best interest or not. In all instances, your accountant is, I guess, the starting position for that. Next question. So hoping that helps, Nicole. So next question comes from Miles. Miles says, what specifically do we know about the Brisbane City Council's loosening of development guidelines? We understand that there'll be a softening towards higher density development, but can we expand on this and what we know to be more details? So, Miles, you are partially correct there. It's not actually higher density, but it's actually low, medium residential density that they're actually looking to change. So we are fortunate to be, I guess, dealing with the Brisbane City Council in this regard. Our first meeting with them will actually be next week. So it is a little bit premature to actually talk in detail on this. But what I can tell you is that some changes that Brisbane City Council did approximately 5 years ago, give or take, maybe even 6, called the Brisbane Future Blueprint, made some changes that had some unintended consequences. And the unintended consequences was a severe I guess, lack of supply actually coming through. So going back 5 or 6 years ago, they were constructing nearly 1,000 new dwellings in low, medium residential density areas within Brisbane. And when they made these changes, there were some changes to, I guess, open space requirements and some changing to car parking requirements. When they did that, in a lot of instances, it impacted the yield. And as a result, less developers started doing projects. And so from 1,000 per year, they dropped down to somewhere in the vicinity of 450 dwellings per year. So they negatively impacted the supply that's coming through. What they're looking to do is to say, how do we reverse that trend? How do we actually start to get back towards that 1,000 a year supply mark that we need? Brisbane City Council, in their low medium residential area, they recognise that there's about 14% of the potential supply of the community are going to sit just in those low medium residential. So that is 2- and 3-story dwellings, predominantly townhouses, but they could be smaller unit complexes. It is definitely not the higher density. Okay, it is the smaller projects, just like we are going to do. So what they're going to do is try and reverse some of the impacts of those and look at how they can actually start to fast track that. Now, it requires some changes to legislation. Changes to legislation are relatively slow to, I guess, roll out. And so this is not going to be an instant fix, but what they want to do is engage with key stakeholders in the process to make sure that they're getting the right input into what is the kind of issues, challenges, and problems that we need to remove the roadblocks to make this humanly possible. So I guess PDN have put their, I guess myself in particular, have put their position forward to Brisbane City Council to say, look, we have the largest community of small-scale developers in the country. We see, I guess, where there are fast-track approval processes in all of the other states. So we can see in New South Wales and Victoria and that sort of thing what actually works. For example, what we would like to do is engage with the Brisbane City Council to bring a best-of-breed type solution. So as I touched on, next week is our very first conversation with regards to that. So still early days with regards to that, but we intend to try to help influence that. And when the time is right, we will come out to our community and say, right, this is what is, I guess, potentially being considered. Let's get your feedback on whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. Now, I am fortunate, I guess, being, the head of our organization, to have some very good insights into a lot of that already. However, it is only fair and appropriate that we actually come out to you guys when the time is right. So early days at the moment, Miles, but I'm going to anticipate that whole process will take about 12 months from start to complete before it becomes legislative and able to be actually actioned. But just know that the change is coming, mate. So good question. Next question comes from Vanessa. What do I consider from I guess, with regards to private loan agreements, what do I need to consider with regards to what is a good percentage return? Obviously, security and terms are linked, but would love your feedback. Is interest being paid monthly desirable in your mind, yes or no? And is the security type more important? Is the length of time in the deal the top priority, etc.? What are some good things to actually consider? Vanessa, fantastic question. This is a very long and complicated answer, but I'll try to make it as simple as humanly possible, okay? So from a private loan perspective, there's a couple of things that you need to start to consider. So firstly, I guess the relationship between the entities. You want to understand from a legal perspective whether or not you're going to trigger any ASIC or any APRA regulations with regards to, I guess, the loan. So make sure you engage with your solicitor as to the appropriateness of that in the first place. Now, that said, it is absolutely possible to do what we need to do, so long as you, I guess, get the appropriate ticks in the boxes there. Now, when it comes to what makes the loan attractive, now that really depends on the needs of the developer who needs the funds and the needs of the investor who are looking to, I guess, supply the funds into the project. Each have different needs and each have different priorities. And at each stage, the investor that you, I guess, two different investors might have two completely different needs in that process. What I would say is that there's a couple of rules of thumb to actually start to consider. The level of security that you are offering in the deal will dramatically change the amount of risk that the investor is actually taking. So if you can offer some security, such as a second mortgage, for example, then the relative risk for that investor is low compared to if you had no security and you were just offering a personal guarantee or even no guarantee at all. So you want to start to think of the level of security that you can actually offer. Now, from a ranking perspective, first mortgage is obviously going to get paid first. A second mortgage is going to get paid second. A third mortgage is going to get paid third. But by the time you get past a third mortgage, the ranking of that person, fourth, fifth, sixth mortgage, whilst technically possible, doesn't really protect the investor very, very well because all of the other people are sitting in front of them. Okay, so you want to start to consider that one. The next thing is, well, if you can't offer a mortgage, so a mortgage gives them the ability to sell down your project should you not make good on the loan. Okay. The next level of security would be a caveat. Now, a caveat doesn't give them the opportunity to sell down your property, but rather it puts a padlock on your account, say on your title. And so you can't make changes to the title without them signing off on that. So you can't make changes like remortgaging yourself. You can't make changes like changing the titles. You can't sell the property to someone else. You can't do anything without them signing off on that. So the caveat means that no matter what happens in the process, they are going to be engaged and make sure that they are, signing off on, the impact of what's actually happening there. Now, that doesn't mean that they can actually force the project at any point in time to sell down in order to recoup their costs. But what it does mean is you can't sell the project without their knowledge or consent. Okay, so they are protected from that perspective. But whether you've got their knowledge or consent or not, they are ranked lower than someone who actually has a mortgage. Okay, now then there's a personal guarantee. So a personal guarantee says, look, irrespective of this particular project, you as a human are going to give your personal guarantee that within all of your assets that you've actually got sitting out there, that you're willing to sell down some of those assets in order to pay off the loan. And then the last one is no guarantee at all. And so as you start to go from mortgage and those ranking from first, second, third, etc., then to caveat, then to personal guarantee, and then to no security, that is going to ratchet the interest rate offered to that particular investor. Okay, so the higher up the stack, the higher the interest rate that you're actually going to offer. That's the first part of the equation. The second part of the equation you touched on, should you pay interest monthly or should you wait to the end of the deal, so capitalize the interest? Now, from an investor perspective, you've got two different hats here. So what the investor will want and what the developer will want. Okay, so what the investor wants is they want to feel secure. They want to feel like, well, if you can pay the interest every single month, that gives them a feeling of, hey, the project is going well, your cash flow is doing really good. And so if I'm getting an interest return at the end, it looks and feels and smells like the project is actually going well. From a developer's perspective, though, the exact opposite is actually true. What that does is to say, well, as a developer, I only receive income either from A, other investors giving me money, or B, when I sell the finished product. And without that, I don't actually have, other than my own personal cash resources in the deal, I don't have revenue to actually justify paying that interest. So if somebody's wanting interest today, it's actually eroding the cash resources I've actually got within the project. And because it's eroding the cash resources within the project, you are cannibalizing the investment that the investor gave in the first place to pay down the interest to give some of them back, which means the usable equity that you actually get out of their cash contribution is much, much lower. And so you may have to borrow more money if they're wanting cash flow along the way, which then makes, if you're borrowing more money, that makes, your interest payments higher, makes the profitability of the deal a little bit lower, and has a little bit of a snowballing knock-on effect. Now, you've got to understand, the requirements and needs of that particular investor as to whether or not that is something that you're willing to live with in order to make them feel secure in order for you to actually get that loan, okay? So they're probably the two elements in it. And the last element in there is the time in the deal. And you want to be very, very realistic with regards to your investors coming into the deal, that the only way that they can actually get their cash back is the project actually completing and selling, okay? Or alternatively, you would have to have another investor come in and back them out. Okay, so they are the only two ways you can actually exit an investor from the deal. So they need to understand and be willing to live with the fact that your project is going to take X amount of timeline to actually run. You'll need to give them some realistic timelines with regards to that. And then know that not every project goes 100% to plan. Sometimes council are slow in their approval processes. Sometimes builders get delayed. All sorts of things can happen to a project. So your investor needs to be aware that, look, there is a preferred timeline or an anticipated timeline, but then there also needs to be a little bit of understanding should the project actually run a little bit late. Now, there might be penalty clauses if it's running late. There might be a couple of other things that actually go into that as well for their consideration. But they need to know that unless you get another investor, they have to wait to the very, very end in order to get there. So if they're coming into the project very late in the process, the end might not be far away. But if they're coming in at the very, very start of the process, that could be 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years away for the investment to actually yield a dividend. And for that reason, please make sure that you're very clear and upfront in how you actually have those conversations with your investors. In all instances, I cannot stress this enough, you are going to have to engage with your solicitor to make sure that you are ASIC compliant, to make sure that you are APRA compliant, and that you've got the appropriate terms and conditions to not only protect you as the developer, but also make sure that your investor is also protected, and that the risk and reward is relevant to all of those factors that I've just given you some insights into. So hope that helps, Vanessa. Next one comes from Martin. Martin says, with regards to relocating a bus stop on the frontage of a development, what are some of the issues and challenges that I need to consider? And is there any estimated costs that might be associated with that? So, Martin, fantastic question, mate. I guess whichever council you're actually dealing with, I guess council needs to be cognizant of the fact that you, as the developer or owner of the land where the bus stop is located, are currently being impacted by that bus, but that bus stop has been sitting there for quite some period of time. If they relocate that bus station or bus stop, then someone else is going to be impacted that wasn't impacted previously. So the council is always going to want some form of letter of support that the person receiving the bus stop is willing to take on the burden that is going to place on their property moving forward. Okay. Now, if your project is big enough and your frontage is large enough, depending upon the issues and challenges that you're actually trying to solve, it might be possible that you can relocate the bus stop from within the boundary of your property to another location, again, still within the boundary of your property. Now, if you're able to do that, council is usually very receptive of that kind of response. Okay. If, however, you're trying to get it to impact one of your neighbors, then council is not going to be responsive unless you have that letter of support with your neighbor. Now, in order to get that letter of support from your neighbor, then that neighbor is going to be impacted because there's more buses, more noise, all those sorts of things. They may want to be financially compensated for that. So you'll need to start to consider whether or not that's something that you want to factor into your costs and have that conversation with them. In most instances, if you can keep it within the boundary of your particular property or within the frontage of your property, because maybe it's just impacting your preferred driveway location and you can move it to another spot, that is the best outcome. And in that instance, you're really just paying for, I guess, changing where the signs are, I guess the painting on the road, there might be a bus shelter, those sorts of things. So the cost of relocating that is relatively low, but it's the time that for council to approve it and the time for them to physically relocate it. That's the unknown entity. Okay, some councils are going to move relatively fast in that department. Some councils are going to move relatively slow. In all instances, I would suggest that you actually meet with council, have what is called a pre-lodgement meeting. In some states, it's also called a pre-app or a pre-application meeting. Sit with council and say, look, this is the challenge. We're looking to relocate it. Would council be supportive of that? And you'd be able to look at what the assets are that are actually sitting there. So they call them an asset. So the sign is an asset. The bus shelter is an asset. The seat is an asset. So you'll need to look at those assets and say, well, if we are going to relocate them, are they currently fit and appropriate? Can we just pick them up and move them? Or do we need to bring them up to the current council standards? And what is the cost of a brand new bus stop and a new bus shelter should that actually be required? Okay, so plenty to consider, but your town planner will probably be the best I guess initial assessment as to whether or not he would think that your council will be supportive, and then have that pre-app meeting. Okay. Next question again from Martin. If I purchase a block of 4 existing units and plan to subdivide the land into 5 lots, how many infrastructure credits or equivalent would I typically get from council? So I'm just going to expand this question out for everybody to actually understand. So an infrastructure credit is the terminology that is used in Southeast Queensland for council contributions. Okay, now council contributions are calculated slightly different in every single jurisdiction, but conceptually they work in a very, very similar fashion. Okay, so that is you are going to be creating X new stock. In this instance, he's talked about creating 5 stock. And prior to creating the 5 stock, you also had some existing stock. So sometimes if you had a single block of land, you would have 1 credit. So it would be 5 charges and 1 credit. That would be a balance of 4. Okay. In this instance, he's saying that he's going to create 5, but he had 4 existing units. And so it would be the credits of those 4. Now, on the surface of it, that would give you a charge of 1. However, units, depending upon the kind of unit, may have different, charges associated with it. So a 2-bedroom unit and a 3-bedroom unit may be different. Now, inside Brisbane City Council, where this question is actually evolved, a 2-bedroom unit, it has a approximately $20,000 charge and or credit, whereas a new dwelling might be $30,000. So in that instance, 5 lots of $30,000 credited with 4 lots of $20,000, that would be the difference between those two, Martin. Now that calculation is slightly different in every single jurisdiction, but the concepts apply pretty much to everyone. So hoping that helps there. Lucky last question comes from Ben. Ben says, how clear should a site be after demolition? My site, while 99% clear, really needs someone to go around by hand and pick up half bricks and bits of rubble and those sorts of things. It's not a huge amount and probably enough to fill a small skip, but is this something that should be reasonably expected of a professional demolition crew before leaving the site, or is that just something that comes as a byproduct? Ben, it's a fantastic question, mate, and it really comes down to the scope of works that you've actually given that demolition crew in the first place. So when they say clean, there should, in their definition of their contract, actually say what clean actually represents. If they don't say that, then it is very, very ambiguous with what you've paid for with regards to what you're actually trying to get. So in reviewing their quotation or their scope of works, you need to identify what they deem clean to be. And if they don't have a definition, or if they do have a definition and you're not happy with that, then you want to respond back to them and say, look, this is the level of cleanliness that I'm actually looking for. So all small debris greater than yay size, so you might use a scraping tool, for example, to scrape the surface of that to actually pick all of that up. Now, there's always going to be some small debris that falls through the cracks on those sorts of things. But what you don't want is you don't want a whole bunch of rubble that you need to pick up afterwards, as in this instance you've actually touched on as well. Now, most demolition crews are very receptive of, making sure that they've got that scope correct in the first place. They may adjust the price points because the machinery they bring to get that level of cleanliness will be slightly different, because they'll need little rakes to actually pull everything out of that surface levels side of things. So make sure that you get that scope done. Anyway, mate, hopefully that helps you, understand what is needed for your scope for next time round. That said, folks, that is the last of our questions today. If you would like to submit your questions for next month, I guess click on the link below, propdev.info/open-mic. Submit your questions early, and I will do whatever it is I can to answer your questions on the first Sunday of every single month. That said, folks, we run events all the way around the country. We would love to see you at these. We currently run them in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. They are I guess, physical if you are in those geographies, but we also live stream them. So no matter where you're located, you can actually dial into any single one of those events anywhere around the country. So we run about 45 events a year in doing that. So lots of opportunity to engage with us along the way. So if you would love to join us, we would love to see you at one of those next meetups. I'm going to say until then, folks, bye for now. Bye.